Hey, everybody, and welcome aboard to Local Matters, where living local never felt so good. You know, ever since Governor Kay Ivey's swearing into office, she has said that she wants to put a stop to the opioid addiction that is growing in Alabama. According to officials, Alabama remains the nation's top opioid prescribing state. That's why officials here have created and established several programs and tools to get those numbers down. And when we come back, we will address drug abuse facts and myths surrounding drug use in communities. You know why? Because if it's local, it matters.
Dance. Let me see you move.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us and welcome back to Local Matters. You know, Alabama remains the nation's top opioid prescribing state. That's why officials here have created and continue to create programs and tools to get those numbers down. Joining me to talk about the opioid abuse problem and myths about who's using drugs in the first place is none other than my good friend, Mr. Saram Selassie. Oh, it's so good to have you here.
Good to be here.
You know, it's been a while
Right.
since you've been here with us. I mean, every time you come on, though, you're always coming with great information that communities can use, that you're bringing awareness to us about many different issues.
Right.
So it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
I know that you guys there at ASAP are getting ready for a big day coming up soon. Tell me
Yes.
about that. You're still with ASAP, right?
Sure am.
Okay.
So what we have coming up, Dottie, and 1st of all, let me jump back, and I want to thank you for having this very, very important and relevant show in the community. Local Matters now a little over 3 years. I'm
Right.
just so proud of you guys here at
Yeah.
TV24 and the work that you do that really helps educate the community on those pertinent issues. But as you said, we're getting ready for this Saturday, April 28th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. to host the National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. Our
Right,
last one,
yeah.
and thanks to help from people like yourself and others, we collected over 270 pounds of unused and expired prescription drugs,
Wow,
Dottie. Again, I
wow.
repeat, 270.
Yeah.
And the only way we were able to do that in the community is by getting the word out
Yeah.
through shows like yours and all the other people that help us, you know, really let the community know what's going on.
Right.
But this time, we just recently received a $96,000 grant from the Alabama Department of Mental Health. Thank you, thank you.
Congratulations. That's huge because I know
Thank you.
tough competition there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But we just received a $96,000 grant to expand our outreach efforts to the opioid crisis. So with this Saturday, instead of just one location at the Walgreens at 800 Quintard, we'll now have 3 total locations. We'll be with the Sheriff's Department
Okay.
at the
Okay.
Quintard Mall. So
Okay.
the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department, one of our partners.
Okay.
We'll be back at Walgreens 800 Quintard with the Anniston Police Department.
Okay.
And now we'll also be at the Jacksonville Police Department. I'm sorry, the Jacksonville Police Department is assisting us at the Walgreens in Jacksonville.
Okay.
So there will be 3 locations throughout the community where consumers can come and bring those unused and expired prescription drugs.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. And you know, and from according to numbers, it's still needed. I mean, we did this show last year. We did this show a year before last, and it seems that the numbers are not really going down the way they should.
Right.
I mean, there are 4 cities: Anniston, Gadsden, Tuscaloosa, Montgomery. Those are top 4 cities.
Right.
Top 4 cities in what though?
And opioid abuse.
Oof.
And again, thankfully, now I feel like you hear that comedian Country Wayne that says help is on the way.
Right.
Now we finally have help on the way, you know, through the funding that our agency is receiving. And actually, the state is broken up into 4 regions, and we're in Region 2. So thankfully, now we have some funding to specifically focus in on those issues because, you know, it's the opioid crisis has been with us really for a while, but now it's coming to the forefront to mainstream public knowledge. But
Yeah.
if you don't have funding, resources, and evidence-based programs that are tied together to address those needs, then those numbers are going to continue. And I mean, it really almost, you know, pretty much broke my heart in 2012 when that AL.com article came out and said Alabama was #1 in the country.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. 'Cause
In
I-
the country for opioid abuse.
Yeah.
And that just really turned my stomach knowing what I do. It's like, wow, we have to do more. We have to get out there more in the streets.
and you mentioned something earlier too, that it's been with us for a while.
Right.
The opioid crisis has been with us for a while, but it seems as though we weren't really talking about it until maybe the last 2-3 years.
Right.
There are a lot of myths out here right now that poor people, uneducated people, that they are the biggest drug users ever, and it take a lot of heat. But from what we can tell, this opioid crisis, it's really, really hitting hard to a different demographic, and I want to talk about that when we come back. I want us to talk more about the numbers, who's actually using drugs, and really address the myths out here about who's using drugs in the first place. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about that. We'll be right back with Local Matters. Hey everybody, welcome back to Local Matters. It's so good to have you join us here where living local never felt so darn good. I've been sitting here talking with Mr. Saram Selassie, and so it's good to have him back. Welcome back here to Local Matters. We've been talking about this opioid crisis that has really taken this country, it's really been taking a strong hold on the country.
Right.
Before we went to break, we were talking about the top 4 cities in Alabama. Anniston is on that list. Gadsden's on that list. Tuscaloosa, Montgomery, on that list for top cities with opioid abuse.
Right.
You mentioned during the first half that help is on the way.
Right. And again, Dottie, it's going to take more and more collaborative efforts across the board. And one thing that I'm excited about is that many of our local law enforcement agencies immediately, they have jumped on board and are willing to support us in our efforts to get some of those drugs out of the community. But oftentimes when people hear about national prescription drug takebacks, they may say, oh, well, dang it, I forgot, or I missed the date.
Exactly.
That does not have to be an impediment to you getting rid of those drugs. There are drop box locations at least 5 places throughout the county. The Piedmont Police Department, Jacksonville Police Department, Oxford, Anniston Police Departments, as well as Calhoun County Sheriff's Departments.
Oh, good. I'm
These
glad
are
you
drop
know-
box
yes.
locations, exactly. And, people can go in those departments and drop off their drugs. So, the rest of the 363 days a year,
Yes.
you have an opportunity to
Yes.
get rid of those drugs.
Yes.
But please, we want to stress to your listeners, your viewers, do not flush those prescription drugs because it can cause harm to our local water system.
Wow, did not know that either. Because medicines and prescription medicine, they do remain in most people's medicine cabinets for weeks, months, if not years. So I'm glad you were able to share with the viewers that if I missed that day, it's okay. Not all is lost. I can still drop them off, somewhere. And
Right.
you've mentioned those places, so thank you for that. But also before we went to break, we were talking about the myths that are out here. That for a long time, I think opioid has been on the list. It's been a crisis, if you will, for a long time.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of the times we were looking at certain communities, poor people, people who are not educated, and there are these myths that are out here that's who our big drug users are. But from research shows us that they're not the ones that are really the big drug users, but they are the ones who are going to be arrested first.
Unfortunately, sometimes in our society, Dottie, we know there is unequal and unfair treatment.
Yeah.
And the opioid crisis especially had really hit hard in the African American community around the late 60s, early 70s. And the opioid of choice was heroin. It was a big booming thing. And unfortunately, that time during the country, not to get political,
Right.
but during the country, people focused more so on the prosecution and the criminalization of these people instead of the mental health and the
Right.
prevention
Because I remember that was a big buzzword: war on drugs.
War on drugs. And
Yeah,
guess what?
yeah.
That war on drugs, we still haven't won it.
we
And that's
still haven't won it.
ridiculous. So that's why agencies like ours and the efforts that you guys are working with us on, we have to get the word out. We have to inform people. And hopefully they never start. But then on the back end, we have to be realistic. there has to be that treatment for those individuals,
Yes.
and we cannot lock up away the problem.
Yes.
We cannot
Ooh.
do that, Dottie.
Ooh, I'm so glad. I have a full screen, Aaron. I want to bring it up right now because we are living in some really, really stressful times.
Right.
You know, and if you really ask, why do people use drugs in the first place? You know, if we look at what's on our screen here, number 1 through 4, people with poor family relationships, you know, people who are working all the time, they don't have time to bond with family, social factors sometimes, peer pressure for people, low self-esteem, but certainly coping with stress.
Right.
I would probably say, I think you would agree, number 4.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I definitely want to talk about number 4 because, again, when you think about drugs don't know race. Drugs don't know sex.
Right, no.
They just know how to damage someone's body if they're abusing them.
Yes.
And coping with stress, again, if you look at different communities, and while oftentimes people in low impoverished communities get labeled as druggies, is because,
Druggies, yeah.
you know, when they're trying to deal with stress, different communities have different resources on how to handle stress.
Yes.
Some communities, more wealthy communities, may have a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and someone to help them through those issues, counselors. And some of our poorer communities, they don't have those resources. They don't even, barely, some of them don't have insurance, access to adequate insurance. That's why the state should be expanding Medicaid. That's another story.
Right.
But when instead they can't cope with the stress, so what do? They self-medicate. They
And then
find drugs or opioids to make them feel a little better, take them away from those issues.
And I don't even know if theirs are so much opioids though, because I from what I can tell and see, that when you are in impoverished communities, marginalized population communities, are more so quick because they don't have access to doctors
Right.
to go and prescribe them medications.
Right.
So they're going to look more for the street drugs.
Exactly.
You know, these counterfeit marijuana, hash or spice.
Right.
These things are really impacting our communities.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And that's why, again, with agencies like ours, our efforts are so much. Now, we're not a treatment agency. We are only prevention. Our
Right.
whole goal and idea is to catch people on the front end. And then, because we're not treatment and we're not counselors, we can then point them in the direction of resources. I've always said in many of our communities, we talk about there's a generation gap and people view young people a different way. There's not a generation gap, there's an information gap. And that's what we're doing through these new strategies that we're implementing called info dissemination strategies, community-based processes, and environmental strategies, to where we look at a wide range of activities to hopefully make an impact on this issue. And again, I'm not saying we have all the answers, but it has to be a collaborative and community effort in order to really make a dent in this crisis.
And I really do think too, because again, we are so, you know, we are social media. We spend a lot of time on social media.
Right.
And less time talking face to face, less time talking with our youth in a certain way. So communities, agencies like yours are out in the schools.
Right.
And they're bringing this information to young kids. How young are
So
you?
predominantly in the school systems, we focus on 5th through 8th grade, but we still service all young people that we can come in contact with. But that's our primary target because we feel the earlier you can get to them, the better, and evidence-based curriculums have shown the better the outcomes are down the road. But again, we cover all young people and then adults as well. Whenever we're at town hall meetings or doing different community events, we want to make sure as many people as possible hear our message.
Okay. Well, we've got to go to break. When we come right back, we'll talk more about what ASAP is doing here in our community. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Local Matters. Hey everybody, welcome back to Local Matters. We're living local, never felt so good. I'm Dottie Rimpsey and I'm joined with Mr. Saram Selassie. He is the Executive Director for ASAP.
Yes.
And you have been there, as you mentioned at the top of the show, for how many years now?
Several years
Several
now.
years now.
Several
7,
years.
8, just you've been there a while and
I
doing
have.
some great things in the community. And I know sometimes you probably say, are we really making a dent in what we're doing? Because the numbers keep inching up and in surrounding communities, but not only in our communities, but across this country. And I want you to know that, yeah, you're doing a good job, because you have to keep stressing that if you can just save one life, it's worth it. And so you're starting early.
Yeah, Benjamin Franklin said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, you know, with jobs like these, which are thankless jobs, I don't do it so much for, oh, I know the numbers are going to come down, because drugs will always be with us. But I do it for the young kid that may be at Anniston Middle School and says, wow, you know, I really learned something today and I want to do something different with my life.
Right.
Or that young lady at White Plains
Right.
Elementary School that
Right.
just didn't know about what fentanyl was or heroin,
Right.
and just won't go down that same path. That's what I really do it for, Dottie. And I find joy in that, you know, just knowing that I'm able to help young people and help different individuals in our community to hopefully not live a life of substance abuse.
I think the more we keep talking to our young people about the dangers, because I know that, you know, my kids, my students sometimes look at me and they may say, oh, that happened years ago. That was back in the 80s. That's so, oh, you know, drugs are different now. You know, we can do this. I remember being young and feeling invincible, that things are not going to happen to me. They're going to happen to that other person, that other girl down the street, not me. But when you continue to find yourself going to funerals, my sons and I have gone to several funerals over the past several weeks.
Right.
And it seems like every other Saturday now, I'm getting dressed to go to a funeral. These are young people that are leaving us.
Young people, Dottie.
Young people.
Again, a lot of young people in their mid-20s, you know, haven't even really started life fully, you know, and that's really heartbreaking. And I know one of our other prevention specialists, that's the story he tells why he even got in prevention. One of his classmates actually passed from an overdose, and he said something has to be done. And what we do, you know, it's not really pie in the sky kind of hopes and dreams. These are targeted efforts. You know, we use 5 specific strategies that we go with: info dissemination, that's your newsletters and speaking engagements, stuff like that. Environmental, of course, is your prescription drug take-back days. That's another one.
Okay.
Then you have community-based. You're very familiar with the Calhoun County Children's Policy Council, where we had this collaborative effort of a lot of service providers coming to the table together to figure out how can we address these issues, especially dealing with substance abuse.
Yeah.
Another collaborative effort in our community-based strategy is working with the Anniston Fatherhood Initiative.
Yes.
Last year and then this year too.
They're really doing a lot.
They are.
really
Last
are.
year, this year too, we're taking a group of young men from low poverty, impoverished communities. We're taking them out to Camp Lee and teaching them how to fish and teaching them how to zip line and all those different fun activities.
Right.
And not so much to say, hey, don't do drugs, but here are some alternatives to drugs that are fun and more engaging than what you would be doing just sitting there on the corner.
Right.
And that leads me into what's called our alternative strategy.
Okay.
Different events like that are alternative lifestyles to where they don't have to live lives of substance abuse, and that's where we have done football camps and back to school rallies. Those are alternative events. And last but not least, our 5th strategy is education. And the curriculum that we use is called Too Good for Drugs, and it's a whole process that our young people go through in the schools to where they learn about not just the drugs, but character issues. You know, what does it mean to be honest? What does it mean to be loyal, punctual, on time? These are lifestyle, life skill type educational tools that help young people see that, wait a minute, there's a path that I need to take. If I want to be that lawyer, that doctor, hey, that Honda employee, these are the things that I need to do in order to be successful in life. So that's kind of the multifaceted approach that we take.
And even when I'm talking with young girls, and not to be and sound vain, but it's true. When I'm talking with young girls, and I don't talk about my age, you know, women don't talk about their age, you know, but I don't talk, but when I do tell them, they go, oh, Miss Dottie, I can't believe. And I said, one of the things I want to say, and I'm proud to say, I've never done drugs. Most of the time, when you see people who are a certain age and they look well over their age, 10, 15, 20 years, they got all these health problems, they look bad, you can bet most of the time they've done drugs. And I try to impress them and let young people know that when you begin to do drugs at a very early age, you may think you're getting by. As my grandmother used to always say, you may get by, but you won't get away. It'll catch up with you. And you'll be 40 and feeling like you're 80 or looking like you're 80 because your body, it really will take a hold. And that is enough for some people just to say, I don't want to be 40 and feeling and looking like I'm 80.
And a lot of this, Dottie, oftentimes it just takes bravery, because again, I want to stress so very much that these aren't bad people that are on drugs.
No.
but these are some people who have made some mistakes in life. They face some problems, but they have not yet been brave enough to handle those problems and to address them directly. Drugs becomes that easy scapegoat to take them away from it.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I've got a full screen I want to bring up right quick. It says,
Okay.
what can just an average person do?
Right.
When we're talking about going back to prescription drugs, again, because that's another whole demographic, as we
Right.
mentioned. Street drugs, more for that impoverished community, marginalized population. Opioids, really affecting a whole different demographic. What can we do? If you're here, do not share your medications with others. I've seen people do it all the time. You know, people have offered me, I would say, girl, I got a terrible headache. I just can't get rid of it. Girl, here's a pain. Here's something I had when I went to the dentist last year. Girl, take it. Girl,
Not
it'll help you.
supposed to do that.
But you don't supposed to do that because you don't know how that's going to impact you.
Right.
When a doctor has prescribed it for Sally and you take Sally's drugs,
Right.
you just don't know how it's going to impact you. And then you mentioned this earlier, disposing of those prescription drugs properly.
Properly. That's the most important thing.
Targeted education, you said you guys are doing there at ASAP.
Right.
So we are just about ready to run out of time.
Oh,
I want to
okay.
just say, keep doing what
Thank
you're
you.
doing
Thank
with
you.
ASAP. Once again, I want to bring up that graphic with your number on there. People miss that drug take back day.
Right.
Where can they drop it off? Give us those locations one more time.
Again, all your local police departments, as well as the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department, those are all the locations.
Okay.
And again, but we'll be at the Walgreens in Jacksonville and Anniston, Saturday,
Okay.
10 a.m. to 2 p.m., as well as the Oxford Quintard Mall.
Okay. All right. Well, we thank you for watching us. You know why? Because if it's local, it matters. We'll see you back next time.